You did not stumble onto this message by accident. You did not find this by scrolling mindlessly through a sea of noise, landing here the way a leaf falls without direction. No, something pulled you here. Something older than the algorithm, older than the platform, older than the device in your hands right now. And if you will be still for just a moment, if you will let the weight of what I am about to say actually land in your chest, you will feel it. You have been expected here, not hoped for, not wished for, but expected. Heaven has been holding this moment in reserve, sealed and set apart, waiting for the precise second when you would be ready to receive it. There is a particular kind of person who finds their way to a message like this one. Not everyone does. Most people scroll past. Most people are too distracted, too defended, too busy performing the version of themselves the world demands to slow down long enough to hear what the deeper part of them already knows. But you stopped. You are here, and that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. You are one of the chosen ones. And before you dismiss that as language designed to flatter you, I want you to sit with what that actually means, because it does not mean your life has been easy. It does not mean the road has been smooth or that the doors have swung open without resistance. If anything, the opposite has been true. Chosen ones do not live easy lives. They live meaningful ones. And the difference between those two things is enormous. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were born into the wrong moment? Like the world around you was moving at a frequency you could never quite match? Like, no matter how hard you tried to fit inside the life, everyone else seemed to live so effortlessly. Something in you kept pulling away, kept reaching for something more, something deeper, something you could not even name? That is not dysfunction. That is design. That restlessness you have carried, that sense of incompletion, that ache for a purpose larger than the ordinary, those are not symptoms of something wrong with you. They are signs that you were made for something specific. There are signs that chosen ones carry. And I want you to listen carefully, because some of these will feel like someone finally found the language for what you have never been able to explain. The first sign is that you have always felt things more deeply than the people around you. Not just emotion, but everything. You sense tension in rooms before it is spoken. You feel the weight of others without being told what they are carrying. Some people called it sensitivity and meant it as a criticism. But what they were actually witnessing was a form of spiritual perception that most people never develop. The second sign is that your dreams have always felt different. Not just vivid, but loaded. Like there is information in them. Like something is trying to reach you through that space between sleep and waking, leaving impressions on you that follow you into your days and will not let go until you pay attention to them. The third sign is that you have walked through seasons of isolation that you could not explain and could not escape. Seasons where even the people closest to you felt unreachable, where you sat in rooms full of people and still felt profoundly alone. And rather than being a sign of rejection, that isolation was preparation. Separation always precedes elevation in the economy of God. The seed is buried before it blooms. The gold is placed in the fire before it is placed on display. The fourth sign is that people have always come to you, not because you sought them out, but because something in your presence draws them. Strangers tell you things they have never told anyone. Broken people find their way into your orbit. Difficult situations land in your lap not because the universe is punishing you, but because you were equipped to carry what others cannot. And the fifth sign, the one that may be the most important, is that you have never been able to fully give up. Even when you had every reason to. Even when the evidence said quit. Even when the pain said stop. Even when the silence from heaven felt deafening. and the waiting felt endless. Something in you, something that did not originate with you, kept you moving. That is not your strength alone. That is the hand of God holding the most important thing He invested in, which is you. Now I need you to hear this with every part of you that is awake right now. God has been waiting for you, not tolerating you, not managing you, not reluctantly keeping you in His plan because He made a promise and He is too committed to walk it back, waiting for you, with the kind of anticipation a father feels when a child who has been away too long is finally on their way home. The word finally is not a small word. It is the exhale of heaven after a long-held breath, and that word has your name attached to it. You were not born into this generation by accident. Of every era in human history, of every window of time that has ever opened and closed, you were placed here, now, in this specific century, this specific decade, this specific moment of global uncertainty and spiritual hunger and cultural collapse, because you were made for exactly this. The chaos around you is not evidence that God has lost control. It is evidence that the moment has finally arrived, for which chosen ones like you were always being prepared. I know what some of you have walked through to get to this moment. I know the word finally carries a particular weight for those of you who have been waiting so long that waiting itself started to feel like the permanent condition rather than the temporary one. I know that some of you have prayed prayers that seem to dissolve into the ceiling. I know that some of you have believed, really believed, and still watched the thing you believed for collapse in front of you. And I know that the question that followed that collapse, the quiet, terrifying question, was whether you had been wrong about who you were, wrong about what you were made for, wrong about whether God was paying attention at all. He was paying attention. He has never stopped paying attention. And the very fact that you are still here, still breathing, still reaching, still willing to sit with a message like this one rather than giving in to the numbness that swallows most people, is itself the evidence that you have not been forgotten. You have been held, hidden in the shadow of His hand, as the scripture says, not abandoned, but protected. Not delayed because you were insufficient, but delayed because the fullness of what was prepared for you required a fullness of time. There is a version of your story that has already been written in heaven. Not a version that overrides your choices or removes your agency, but a version that accounts for every one of them. A version that weaves even your failures, even your wrong turns, even your seasons of running in the wrong direction, into a narrative so complete and so beautiful that when you finally see it whole, you will understand why none of it was wasted. Not one tear, not one night, not one silent prayer spoken into what felt like an empty room. Right now, in this moment, I want you to do something. I want you to take breath, a real one, not the shallow kind you have been breathing through your busy day, but a breath that reaches down into the place in you that has been holding tension for longer than you can remember. And as you breathe, I want you to say these words, either out loud or in the private chamber of your heart. Say, I am not here by accident. I am expected. I am chosen. I was made for this moment. If those words resonated in you, if something in your chest moved when you said them, that is not coincidence. That is recognition. Your spirit recognizing its own assignment. Your inner self confirming what God has always known about you, that you are not ordinary. You have never been ordinary. And the ordinary life you may have been trying to force yourself into was never going to fit, because it was never designed for you. If you feel this message reaching you today, I want you to go to the comments right now and type the number 999, not as a superstition, not as a ritual, but as a declaration. 9 is the number of divine completeness and finality in Scripture. 3 nines together is a statement that you are ready. Ready for the completion of what God began in you. Ready for the fullness of the purpose you were placed here to carry. Ready to stop surviving your calling and start walking in it. Type 999 in the comments and know that in doing so, you are joining a company of people all over the world who are waking up to the same thing at the same time. All of them chosen, all of them arriving, all of them finally ready. Because this is the hour. Not next year, not when things calm down, not when you feel more prepared or more worthy or more healed now. The invitation is open now. The door that was always meant to open for you is opening now. And the voice of heaven, the voice that has been speaking over you since before you took your first breath, is saying a single, glorious, weighted word over your life. Finally, you are here, and everything changes from this moment forward. The weight you have been carrying is not ordinary weight. You have known this for a long time, even if you have never had the words for it. There is a particular kind of heaviness that chosen ones carry, and it is different from the heaviness that comes from simple hardship or bad luck or poor decisions. It is the heaviness of a life that is being shaped for something greater than what is currently visible. It is the pressure of a diamond being formed. It is the tension of a bow being drawn back before the arrow is released. And if you have spent years wondering why your load has felt heavier than everyone else around you, why the resistance in your life has seemed disproportionate to what you can see, this is the answer. You are not being crushed. You are being formed. There is a man in Scripture whose story I want to walk you through today, because his life is not just ancient history. His life is a mirror, and when you look into it clearly, you will see something you may not have been able to see before, which is yourself. His name was Joseph, and from the moment he arrived in the world, something about him was different. His father Jacob loved him with a particular intensity, not because Jacob was a perfect father who never made mistakes, but because something in Jacob recognized something in Joseph that could not be explained by ordinary terms. There was a mark on this young man. There was a weight of destiny on his life that announced itself before he had done anything to earn it. And that mark, that weight, that quality of being set apart before you have proven yourself is one of the most misunderstood experiences a chosen one can have. Because being marked before you are ready does not protect you from pain. It invites a particular kind of it. The same light that makes you visible to heaven makes you visible to opposition. The same quality that causes God to look at you and say, finally, is the quality that causes the enemy to look at you and say, not if I can help it. Joseph discovered this truth not gradually but violently. His brothers, the people who shared his blood, the people who should have been his greatest protectors, looked at the mark on his life and decided they could not tolerate it. Not because Joseph had wronged them in any fundamental way, but because his very presence exposed something in them. His dreams, the ones God gave him in the night, the ones that pointed toward his elevation, those dreams did not just describe his future. They disturbed everyone around him who was not ready to celebrate a chosen one. And I need you to hear this part carefully, because it is directly relevant to your life right now. The people who have resisted you, the ones who pulled away when your light got brighter, the ones who minimized your gifts or questioned your worth, or made you feel like you were too much, too intense, too hopeful, too different. Those people were not simply being cruel. They were responding to something they could sense but could not name. Your anointing makes people uncomfortable before it, makes them believers. Your calling disrupts the atmosphere around you before it transforms it. And the resistance you have faced from the people closest to you has not been evidence that your dreams were wrong. It has been evidence that your dreams were real enough to be threatening. Joseph's brothers threw him into a pit. Let that settle for a moment. Not strangers, not enemies from another nation. His brothers, the people who ate at the same table, who knew his name, who watched him grow. They stripped him of the coat father had given him, the outward symbol of his favor and his calling, and they threw him into a pit and sat down to eat bread while he cried out from the bottom of it. And if you have ever cried out from the bottom of something, while the people around you went on with their ordinary lives as if your pain was not happening, you know what Joseph felt in that pit. You know the particular loneliness of suffering that no one around you seemed to register. You know what it is to be stripped of the visible symbols of your calling and left in a place so low you cannot see the sky. But here is what the pit could not take from Joseph. It could not take the dream. The coat was gone. The favor of his father felt impossibly far away. The walls of the pit were real, and the darkness was real, and the cries of a young man who had done nothing to deserve this were real. But the dream that God had placed inside him, the vision of what he was made for, the seed of purpose that had been planted in him before he understood what it meant, that could not be stripped, that could not be thrown into a pit, that lived in a place his brothers could not reach, in a place circumstances could not touch, in a place that belonged entirely to God and to the one God had chosen. And I am speaking directly to someone right now who has been in a pit. Maybe you are in one today. Maybe the pit is a relationship that has left you feeling discarded. Maybe the pit is a financial situation that has stripped away everything you thought defined you. Maybe the pit is a season of illness or loss or grief so heavy that you have forgotten what it felt like to stand upright. Maybe the pit is a dream deferred so many times that you have begun to question whether you were ever really called or whether you imagined the whole thing. I want you to hear what the story of Joseph declares over your situation with absolute authority. The pit is not your destination. The pit is a corridor, and corridors, by definition, lead somewhere. Joseph was pulled out of the pit and sold into slavery. And I know that sounds like going from bad to worse, and in the natural it was. But watch what God was doing beneath the surface of what looked like disaster. Every mile, Joseph traveled away from his home, every step deeper into a foreign land. Every layer of familiarity and comfort and identity that was stripped away was also a step closer to the throne room he did not yet know existed. God was not absent in the slavery. God was not silent in the suffering. God was engineering in the darkness what could not have been built in the light. Genesis 39 verse 2 says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." Did you catch that? In the house of his master, in slavery, in a foreign land, stripped of his freedom, separated from his family, robbed of his future as he understood it. And the scripture says, the Lord was with him. Not the Lord was with him once he got through it. Not the Lord was with him after the blessing came. The Lord was with him there, in the middle of it, in the place that looked like the opposite of chosen, in the place that looked like the story had gone wrong. And if God was with Joseph in the pit and in the slave house, then God is with you in whatever pit or slave house you currently find yourself in. Not waiting for you at the exit, present with you in the middle. This is the truth that changes everything about how you read your own story. You have been reading your hard seasons as interruptions to your calling. God has been writing them as chapters of it. You have been reading your losses as evidence that you missed something. God has been using them as curriculum. You have been reading your isolation as punishment. God has been using it as preparation. And the distance between those two readings is the distance between despair and hope, between quitting and continuing, between arriving at your destiny and stopping just short of it. Joseph did not know in the slave house that he was being positioned. He could not see Pharaoh's palace from where he stood. He could not see the moment that was coming when everything that had been stripped from him would be restored with a magnitude that would make the original loss look small by comparison. He only knew one thing, and it was the thing that kept him. He knew that the dream was real. He knew that what God had shown him in the night had not been revoked by what his brothers had done in the day. He knew that his story was not over, even when every visible piece of evidence suggested otherwise. And that knowing, that stubborn, unshakable, sometimes barely breathing knowing, is what I see in you. You are still here. After everything that has tried to take you out, after every pit and every betrayal and every season that should have broken you, you are still here. Still reaching, still listening, still holding on to something that the world around you cannot see, but that you cannot bring yourself to let go of. That is not stubbornness. That is faithfulness. And faithfulness in the economy of God is never wasted. The weight you carry is not punishment. It is the weight of a life that matters enough to be contested, a calling that is real enough to be resisted, a destiny that is significant enough to require preparation rather than shortcuts. And every heavy thing you have carried has been building something in you that lightweight people cannot access, a depth of character, a quality of compassion, a strength of spirit that will be the very thing that qualifies you to hold what God is about to place in your hands. Your pit was not the end. It was never the end. It was always the beginning of something your brothers could not imagine and your circumstances could not prevent. There is a frequency that runs through the life of every chosen one, and most people never learn to name it. They feel it, the way you feel a sound before you hear it, the way something in you responds to certain music, or certain silences, or certain moments. Prayer when the air in the room seems to shift and become something other than ordinary air. You have felt this. You have had moments where mind moved with a clarity that surprised even you, where an answer came before you had finished forming the question one, where something unlocked inside you, and for a brief, luminous moment, you understood exactly who you were and exactly what you were made for. Those moments were not accidents. They were not random neurological events. They were your mind operating at the frequency it was designed for, the frequency God built into you before the world trained you away from it. Joseph carried this frequency. It was the thing that made his dreams different from ordinary dreams. It was the thing that allowed him, years later in a prison in Egypt, to look at two men and hear the meaning hidden inside the images they had seen in their sleep. It was the thing that brought him before Pharaoh and allowed him to take 7 cows and 7 heads of grain and read inside them the economic future of an entire civilization. That was not luck. That was not merely education or intelligence in the conventional sense. That was a mind operating at a frequency that most people never access, a frequency of insight, of pattern recognition, of deep knowing that comes from a place beneath ordinary thought. And for centuries, the people who witnessed that quality in others like Joseph called it by spiritual names: anointing, discernment, divine wisdom. They were not wrong to call it those things. But what they were witnessing also had a physical dimension, one that science has only recently developed the instruments to measure and the language to describe, because what God builds in the spirit always has an expression in the body. The invisible always leaves a fingerprint on the visible, and the fingerprint of a chosen one's inner frequency shows up measurably and consistently in the architecture of their brain. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. It is the brainwave pattern associated with moments of sudden insight, with flashes of creative genius, with the kind of thinking that breaks through problems that ordinary linear thought cannot solve. It is the frequency of the eureka moment. It is the frequency of the mind when it is operating not just at capacity, but beyond what capacity normally allows. And alongside it lives another wave, the theta wave, running between 4 and 8 cycles per second, which is the frequency of deep creativity, 2 of intuitive knowing, of the learning state that children live in naturally before the world teaches them to narrow themselves into something more manageable and less magnificent. Children live in theta. That is why they absorb language and music and movement and concept at a speed that shames adult learning. But somewhere between childhood and adulthood, under the pressure of performance and responsibility and the constant noise of a world that rewards conformity over creativity, most people drift away from that state. The theta axis narrows. The gamma flashes come less often, and the person who was built to think at one level ends up spending most of their life thinking at another, grinding through problems with tools that were never meant to be their primary ones, exhausted by a mental effort that should not be as hard as it has become. But the frequency never leaves. It is still there, beneath the noise, beneath the busyness, waiting like a signal buried under static, waiting for the right instrument to clear the interference and tune back in. And this is where something remarkable enters the conversation. A neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years of his life working to understand and unlock this. Trained through the corridors of MIT and connected to research programs linked to NASA, he dedicated 3 decades to studying the brainwave patterns of people who consistently performed at exceptional levels. And what he found, after research involving thousands of participants across more than 3,000 days of study, was not mysterious. It was measurable. The people who consistently accessed their highest mental performance were the people whose brains spent more time in theta and gamma states. And more importantly, he found that this axis was not fixed. It was not a gift given to a few and withheld from the rest. It could be activated, it could be restored, and it could be restored in as little as 7 minutes a day. The tool he developed is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track built on the principle of brainwave entrainment, the scientifically documented phenomenon where the brain naturally synchronizes itself to rhythmic external stimuli. You simply listen for 7 minutes. And in those 7 minutes, the carefully calculated frequencies in the audio begin doing what they were built to do, guiding your brain back to the state where clarity lives, where creativity lives, where the kind of thinking that solves real problems and opens real doors becomes not a rare accident, but a daily access point. No meditation practice required, no special skill, no cleared schedule. 7 minutes, and your brain begins returning to the frequency it was always designed to operate in. Now I want to tell you about 2 people, because their stories are not extraordinary cases. They are what happens when a chosen one stops fighting their own frequency and starts working with it. The first is a woman named Maya, 14 months of sleepless nights, a career that had stalled despite everything she had poured into it. She had tried everything she could think of and arrived at a night where she had almost given up looking for answers. She tried this audio on that night. She wrote afterward that she could not explain what shifted, but that for the first time in over a year she slept through the night. And on the Monday morning that followed, she received the call she had been waiting on for 12 months. Her mind, restored to its proper frequency, had finally been able to move in the direction her calling had been pointing all along. The second is a man who had spent years feeling like his thinking was foggy, like the ideas he knew were inside him could not find their way to the surface. He described the change after just 3 weeks of daily use as feeling like someone had cleaned the lens through which he saw everything. Problems he had been circling for months resolved themselves in moments of sudden clarity. He described it as his mind waking up. What he was actually describing was theta and gamma access returning after years of being buried under stress and noise. He told me the first week alone was worth more than everything else he had tried combined. Now I want to speak directly to the thought that just crossed your mind, because I know some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing. And I want to honor that thought completely, because it is a legitimate one. You have been careful with what you have because you have had to be. You have learned not to spend money on promises that do not deliver. And I am not asking you to set aside your discernment. I am asking you to consider one question. What is another year of operating below the frequency you were built for actually costing you? Not in dollars, in missed clarity, in delayed decisions, in the gap between the version of yourself that is accessible when your mind is running at its designed frequency and the version you have been working with under the weight of everything that has buried that access. The Genius Wave normally sells for $49. Through the link in the pinned comment and the description below, you can access it today for just $39. And every purchase comes backed by a full 90-day money-back guarantee. 3 complete months to experience what this does in your life. If you do not feel the difference, you receive every dollar back without question, without delay, without having to justify anything to anyone. I need to say this clearly because it matters for your protection. There are counterfeit versions of this product circulating online. Do not purchase from any source other than the single official link in the pinned comment and the video description. That link is the only place where you are guaranteed to receive the genuine audio and the genuine guarantee. Anything purchased elsewhere carries no protection and is not what Dr. Rivers built. And I want to be honest with you about the window you are currently standing in. This pricing is not permanent. The $39 offer is available for a limited time and to a limited number of people, after which it returns to the standard $49 price. I am not saying this to pressure you. I am saying it because chosen ones do not wait for perfect timing. They recognize the open window and they move through it. The frequency of a chosen one responds to now. The link is in the pinned comment and in the description. It takes less than 2 minutes. And what it gives back is access to the version of your mind that your calling has always required. You were built to think at a level most people never reach. Not because you are above others, but because the assignment on your life requires a quality of mind that operating below your designed frequency cannot sustain. The Genius Wave is not giving you something foreign. It is giving you back something that was always yours. And for a chosen one standing at the threshold of the next chapter of their calling, 7 minutes a day is the smallest possible price for the largest possible return. The link is waiting, the frequency is waiting, and the version of you that your destiny requires has been waiting longest of all. Now let what was just shared settle into you rather than slip past you, because the bridge between understanding a tool and trusting it is always built from stillness, and stillness is exactly where God does his best work in a chosen one. The science and the spirit are not in conflict here. They are 2 languages describing the same truth, that you were built for more than you have been operating in. and that the path back to your full design runs through surrender as much as it runs through strategy. So carry what you just received, let it sit alongside everything else that has been stirring in you today. And now let us go deeper into the thing that the science alone can never fully explain, which is why God has been protecting what He placed in you, even when it looked to every visible eye like the protection had stopped. Joseph had no way of knowing, in Potiphar's house, that every layer of his journey was being held in a grip that no human hand could loosen. He had been sold into slavery by the people who should have celebrated him. He had found his footing in a foreign household, had risen through faithfulness and diligence to a place of trust and responsibility, and then in a single moment, through a lie told by a woman whose advances he had refused, he lost everything he had rebuilt and found himself not merely back at zero, but in a prison, a pit, then slavery, then prison. If you were reading that story from the outside, the reasonable conclusion would be that this man's life was cursed, that something had gone fundamentally wrong, that whatever calling he imagined he carried had been revoked by the weight of everything that kept going wrong around him. But the scripture does not read that way. It reads with a kind of calm authority that is almost startling given the events it is describing. It reads as if someone watching from a higher vantage point could see something the characters inside the story could not see, which is that nothing was spiraling out of control. Everything was moving. And the direction it was moving, though invisible from inside the suffering, was always toward the moment God had prepared from the beginning. Psalms 105 verse 19 says, "Until the time that His word came to pass, the word of the Lord tested him." Sit with that for a moment. The word of the Lord tested him. The very promise that God had spoken over Joseph's life, the dream of the sheaves bowing, the dream of the sun and moon and stars, was not just a comfort to Joseph in his suffering. It was the instrument God used to refine him in it. The promise was not separate from the process. The promise was the process. And every day that Joseph waited in that prison, every day that the fulfillment of what God had shown him did not arrive, was a day that the Word was doing something in him that the fulfillment itself could not have done. It was building the interior capacity to hold what the exterior blessing was about to demand. There is something important to understand about the silence of heaven, because most chosen ones, at some point in their journey, have confused it with the absence of heaven. But silence from God is not the same as stillness in God. When you could not hear Him moving, He was moving the most. The quieter the room felt, the more concentrated the work happening beneath the surface. Think of the moment before a symphony begins, when the conductor raises the baton and every musician in the room goes completely still. That silence is not empty. That silence is loaded. Every instrument is in position. Every player is ready. Every note is prepared and waiting for the single motion that releases all of it at once into something that fills the entire hall. The silence you have been living in has not been the silence of abandonment. It has been the silence of a conductor with his baton raised, holding the fullness of what is prepared, waiting for the appointed moment to release all of it at once into your life. This is a truth that the world does not teach you, and that prosperity theology often skips over in its rush to get to the victory. The blessing of God requires a vessel strong enough to carry it, and vessels are not strengthened by ease. They are strengthened by fire, by pressure, by seasons of waiting that stretch the interior of a person beyond what comfort ever could. God was not keeping the promise from Joseph. God was keeping Joseph for the promise. And there is a difference between those Two things so vast that understanding it will completely reframe the hardest season of your life. Think about what Joseph would have become if the dream had been fulfilled immediately. If Jacob had simply handed him authority based on the coat of favor he already wore. If no pit had come, no slavery, no prison, no years of invisible faithfulness in circumstances that seemed to contradict everything he had been shown. What would have been built in him? He would have had the position without the character to hold it. He would have had the throne without the wisdom to sit on it. He would have had the power without the compassion to use it well. Because it was in the prison that Joseph learned to see people, really see them, to look at two men with troubled faces and care enough about their inner world to ask what was wrong. That quality of attentiveness, of genuine other-centered care, was not born in the palace. It was born in the pit. And it was the very quality that would make him not just a ruler but a redeemer. Not just a man in power, but a man who used power to save lives. God has been doing the same thing in you. Every closed door has been a classroom. Every season of waiting has been a weight room. Every relationship that broke, every opportunity that dissolved, every prayer that seemed to go unanswered has been adding something to your interior architecture that the breakthrough you are moving toward is going to require you to have. You did not lose those years. You were being built in them. And what has been built in you through suffering is not less than what would have been built in ease. It is incomparably more. It is the kind of depth that cannot be manufactured, cannot be taught in a classroom, cannot be downloaded or purchased or acquired by any means other than the particular furnace you have been standing in. I want to speak now to the specific pain of a door that closed when you were certain it was supposed to open. Because many of you have had that experience, the moment where everything lined up, where you had prayed and prepared and positioned yourself, and the thing you had been believing for was right there, and then it was not. And in the aftermath of that closing, the silence was the hardest part. Not the disappointment alone, but the silence that followed it. The absence of an explanation. The feeling of having been led to a threshold and then left standing in front of a wall. What God does not always explain in the moment, He always vindicates in time. The door that closed was not a mistake. It was not a miscommunication between your faith and His power. It was protection in a form you could not yet recognize as such. Because behind that door was something that was not ready for you, or that you were not yet ready for, or that would have taken you in a direction that looked like progress, but was actually a detour away from the specific thing your life was being aimed at. God is not random in His refusals. He is precise, and every no has coordinates. Every closed door has a purpose that the open one beyond it will eventually make plain. You have been protected in ways you have not yet been able to account for. Relationships that did not work out spared you from years in the wrong direction. Opportunities that collapsed saved you from a version of success that would have satisfied you on the surface while starving you at the level of calling. Losses that devastated you redirected you towards something that a smooth road never would have led you to. And when you finally stand in the fullness of what God has been building, you look back at the map of your life from the vantage point of the destination. You will see it with a clarity that will take your breath away. Not that you were cursed, not that you were overlooked, but that you were guided with a precision so exact and a love so thorough that even the worst things were held inside a purpose larger than the pain they carried. This is what it means to be chosen, not to be exempt from difficulty, but to be accompanied through it in a way that transforms the difficulty itself into the raw material of your destiny. Joseph was never alone in the pit. He was never alone in Potiphar's house. He was never alone in the prison. And you have never been alone in any of the places your journey has taken you through. Not in the darkest night, not in the most silent season, not in the moment that felt most like the end of the story. God was present in every one of those places, not watching from a distance, present, working, holding, moving beneath the surface of what you could see, arranging what you could not, protecting what you did not yet know needed protecting. The delays in your life have not been evidence of divine indifference. They have been evidence of divine investment. A God who did not care about your outcome would not have bothered to protect your process. A God who had forgotten your name would not have held your promise in reserve through every season that tried to dissolve it. The very fact that the dream is still alive in you, that the sense of calling has survived everything that has tried to extinguish it, that something in you still reaches and still believes and still refuses to fully settle for less than what you were made for, that is not your strength alone. That is God keeping His word. That is the faithfulness of a Father who does not begin things He does not intend to complete. You are not behind. You are not too late. You have not missed the window. The window is open, and what is coming through it has been held in reserve by the hands of a God who knew exactly what it would take to prepare you to receive it, and was willing to take the time to do it right. Your suddenly is not somewhere in the distant future. It is closer than your fear has allowed you to believe. And the protection that has kept you through everything that tried to stop you is the same protection that is even now clearing the path to what was always yours. Nothing that belongs to you can be taken from you by any force that does not have the permission of the God who gave it. And what God gives, He guards. What He calls, He carries through. What He begins in a chosen one, He is faithful, absolutely and completely faithful, to bring to its appointed completion. You are still standing. After everything that has tried to move you, after every storm that was supposed to be the one that finally broke you, you are still here, still upright, still breathing, still holding the dream that God placed in you before the world ever got its hands on you. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the most significant thing, because the ones who are still standing after what you have been through are not the ones who were untouched by the fire. They are the ones whose foundation was built on something the fire could not consume. And your foundation was not built by you alone. It was laid before you arrived, by hands that knew exactly what this season would demand of you and made sure you were equipped to survive it. So as you move forward into what comes next, carry this with you. The protection was real. The preparation was intentional. And the promise, the one that has lived in you through every pit and every prison and every silent night, that promise has not expired. It has been ripening, and its time is now. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey where the bottom of the pit stops feeling like a catastrophe and starts feeling like a coordinate, where the darkness that once felt like abandonment begins to reveal itself as the specific address where God decided to do His most important work. That shift from victim of your circumstances to participant in a divine strategy is not a small psychological adjustment. It is a complete reorientation of how you read your own life. And it is the shift that Joseph made, not all at once, not in a single triumphant moment of revelation, but slowly, quietly, in the accumulated weight of faithful days lived inside impossible circumstances, until the day came when everything God had been building in the hidden place was suddenly and completely on display. You are somewhere in that process right now. I do not know exactly where. I do not know whether you are in the earliest days of the pit, still raw with the shock of how you got there, still replaying the moment when the people you trusted made the choice that changed everything. Or whether you are further along in the long middle passage, the slave house season, the place where you have found your footing, enough to function, but the distance between where you are and where you know you are, meant to be, still feels enormous, still feels like a gap that ordinary effort cannot close. Or whether you are in the prison, the place that came after you did everything right and still watched something collapse. The place that tests not just your endurance but your theology, not just your patience but your understanding of who God is, and whether His goodness is real or merely a story you have been telling yourself to survive. Wherever you are in that journey, I want to tell you about the moment that changed everything for Joseph. Because it did not come the way you might expect a divine turnaround to come. It did not arrive with thunder or angels, or a vision in the night that pulled back the curtain on the future and showed him the palace that was waiting. It came in the form of a conversation, a small, human, ordinary conversation between a man in a prison and two men who were troubled by dreams they could not understand. And the reason that moment matters so much is not just what Joseph did in it, it is how he showed up for it. The scripture tells us that Joseph looked at these two men and saw that they were troubled. He did not look past them. He did not use the management of his own suffering as an excuse to be unavailable to theirs. He was in prison. He had every reason to be consumed by his own situation, every reason to have turned inward and sealed himself off from the pain of others as a form of self-protection. But instead, he looked at them and he asked the question that changed the entire trajectory of his story. He asked, "Why do you look so sad today?" And in that question, in that simple, other-centered, compassionate turning toward two men who could not yet do anything for him, was the seed of everything that was about to unfold. Because one of those men, the cupbearer, carried in his memory the face of a young Hebrew who had interpreted his dream with accuracy and with kindness. And when Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the known world, stood before a dream that none of his wise men could unlock, the cupbearer remembered. And Joseph was summoned from the prison into the palace in a single day, not gradually, not through a series of small promotions. In a single day, in what the scripture describes with breathtaking economy, Joseph went from the prison to the presence of Pharaoh, and from the presence of Pharaoh to the second highest position in all of Egypt. A suddenly so dramatic, so complete, so total in its reversal, that the only word adequate to describe it is divine. And I want you to feel the weight of what was happening beneath that suddenly, because the suddenly was not disconnected from the years that preceded it. It was the culmination of them. Every day Joseph had spent in faithfulness when faithlessness would have been understandable. Every act of integrity in Potiphar's house when compromise would have been invisible. Every morning he rose in the prison and chose to be present to the people around him rather than consumed by his own injustice. Every one of those days was a brick in the foundation of the moment when Pharaoh looked at him and said, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" The suddenly was the harvest of 1,000 invisible days of faithful seed planting in soil that looked completely dead. Your suddenly is being built the same way, in the days that feel like nothing is happening. In the mornings you rise and choose to keep going when quitting would be so much easier. In the moments you extend kindness to someone who cannot yet repay it. In the choices you make to stay true to what God placed in you, even when the circumstances around you argue loudly that it is not worth it. Those are not wasted moments. Those are the architecture of your turnaround. Those are the bricks of your suddenly being laid one faithful day at a time in a foundation so solid that when the shift comes, nothing will be able to shake what has been built. I need to say something now that I want you to receive carefully, because it touches a place where many chosen ones get stuck. The pit that Joseph sat in was real. The slavery was real. The prison was real. And the pain of all three was real. I am not asking you to pretend that your pit was not as deep as it was, or that the betrayal did not cut as deep as it did, or that the years of waiting have not cost you something genuine. They have, and God knows they have. He has not been observing your suffering from a comfortable distance with a clipboard, marking off the lessons as you learn them. He has been with you in it, moved by it, present to every dimension of what it has cost you to keep going. But here is what I am asking you to consider. What if the depth of the pit was proportional to the height of the destination? What if the severity of the resistance you have faced has been, all along, a kind of inverse measurement of the magnitude of what you are being prepared to carry? Because small callings do not require Joseph-level preparation. Modest destinies do not need pit-to-palace journeys to forge the character required to sustain them. The intensity of your process is data, and the data it carries is not that your story is tragic. It is that your assignment is significant. Significant enough to require a preparation this thorough. Significant enough to attract a resistance this fierce. Significant enough that God Himself has been personally involved in every detail of the forging. Joseph stood before Pharaoh and spoke with a wisdom and a clarity that silenced every educated advisor in the room. Not because he had been to their schools, not because he had access to their libraries, or their networks, or their years of accumulated institutional knowledge, but because what had been built in him through the pit and the prison was a quality of understanding that no classroom produces and no comfort sustains. He had been in the place where you learn what human beings are made of. He had been in the place where you discover the difference between what holds and what breaks. He had been refined down to something so essential and so real that when he opened his mouth, Pharaoh heard in his words the voice of something that could not have been taught, only formed. You carry that same quality. It has been forming in you through everything you have walked through. And the day is coming, closer than you know, when you will stand in a room, or before a person, or at the threshold of an opportunity, and what you carry will be exactly what that moment requires. Not your credentials, not your network, not your polished presentation of yourself. What you carry, the deep, forged, fire-tested thing that has been built in you through the years that felt like loss. That is what will open the door that no human hand could open. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 says, "For the vision awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." The vision awaits an appointed time, not a random time, not a time determined by how hard you pushed or how perfectly you performed or how faithfully you held on without wavering. An appointed time. A time that was set before the vision was given, before the waiting began, before the first morning you woke up and wondered whether anything was still moving in the invisible. The appointment was made in advance and it has not been canceled. The vision that was placed in you, the one that has lingered through seasons long enough to test whether it was real, was not placed there as a cruel experiment in endurance. It was placed there because something with an appointment attached to it needed a vessel willing to carry it until the appointed hour arrived. And that hour is not indefinitely far away. The scripture does not say the vision waits forever. It says it waits for its appointed time. And then it says something that is easy to rush past, but that carries everything. It will certainly come and will not delay, not might come, Not will probably come if enough conditions are met. Will certainly come. The certainty belongs to God, not to your feelings about it. The certainty belongs to the appointment, not to the evidence you can see from where you are standing. And the certainty has your name written inside it, placed there by the same hand that placed the vision in you, because the one who gave the dream and the one who fulfills it is the same God, working from both ends of the timeline simultaneously, moving the appointment toward you as faithfully as he has been moving you toward the appointment. Your pit was not the end. It was never the end. It was always the beginning of something your brothers could not imagine and your circumstances could not prevent. The appointed time is real. The vision is true. And the God who set the appointment is never late. You are part of a fire that was lit before you understood what fire was. And the remarkable thing about fire is that it does not diminish when it is shared. It multiplies. One flame touching another does not halve itself in the giving. It doubles what exists in the world. And that is precisely what is happening right now, in this space, among the people who have found their way to this message at this moment. Something is being transferred. Something is moving from screen to spirit, from word to interior space, from the outer hearing to the deep inner knowing that chosen ones carry like a second heartbeat beneath the rhythm of ordinary life. And what is being transferred is not merely information or inspiration. It is activation. The kind that does not fade when the video ends because it did not originate with the video. It originated with the God who arranged for you to be here. Joseph understood something about community that his early life had not prepared him to value. He had grown up as the favored son, set apart by his father's love and his own gifting, and in the early chapters of his story that set apartness had isolated him as much as it had elevated him. His brothers could not celebrate him. His dreams created distance rather than connection, and the pit, as brutal as it was, taught him something the palace of his favor never could have. It taught him what it means to need other people, what it means to be dependent, to be vulnerable, to be in a place where your gifts and your father's love and your beautiful coat cannot save you, where the only thing that stands between you and destruction is whether another human being chooses to show up for you. That is not a lesson that weakens a chosen one. That is a lesson that completes one, because the calling that God places on a chosen one is never a solitary calling. It is always a calling that runs through community, that requires the contributions of others to reach its fullness, that is meant not just to elevate the individual who carries it, but to create a current of blessing that flows outward and touches everyone in its path. Joseph was not saved from Egypt so that he could sit alone in his wisdom and his power. He was elevated so that he could feed a world that was starving. His breakthrough was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a chapter that saved more lives than Joseph himself could ever have imagined. When he was sitting at the bottom of the pit, wondering if anyone was coming. Your breakthrough is the same kind. What God is building in you is not for you alone. The depth of character that has been forged in your suffering, the quality of compassion that has been refined in your waiting, the wisdom that has been distilled from your darkest seasons. These things were not given to you so that you could carry them quietly to your grave, known only to you and appreciated only by the small circle of people who happened to be standing nearby. They were given to you so that you could be the person in someone else's story who shows up at exactly the right moment and says exactly the right thing and creates exactly the opening that they needed to keep going. You are someone else's Joseph. You are the cupbearer who remembers at the critical moment. You are the voice that speaks the interpretation that unlocks the prison for someone who has been waiting for years, for someone with your specific experience and your specific depth to arrive. And this is why the community that gathers around messages like this one matters more than it might appear to matter on the surface. Because in this space, chosen ones find each other. People who have been walking through their own versions of the pit and the prison discover that they are not alone in what they have been carrying. People who have been told that their sensitivity is a weakness find a room full of people who recognize it as a gift. People who have been misunderstood and underestimated and pushed to the margins discover that the margin is where the most significant people often stand before their moment of elevation comes. And in finding each other, something happens that isolation could never produce. Strength is exchanged. Hope is renewed. The fire that was burning low in one person catches the flame of another, and both leave the encounter brighter than they arrived. This is why I want to gently ask you to do something right now. Something simple. Something that costs you nothing, but could mean everything to the person who is about to find this message the way you found it. If what has been spoken here today has reached something real in you, if any word of this has landed in a place that needed landing, I am asking you right now to hit the like button. Do it now, before you close this video, not as a gesture toward an algorithm, but as an act of agreement. As a way of saying, yes, this is true, this reached me, this is worth amplifying. Every like you give tells the platform that this message matters. And every time the platform agrees, another chosen one who is sitting at the bottom of their pit gets the chance to find it. And then I want to ask you to share this video. Right now, think of one chosen person whose face just came to your mind while this message was playing. You know who they are. They came to you for a reason. Maybe they are in their pit season, and they have run out of language for what they are carrying. Maybe they have been in the long silence, and they need someone to remind them that the cupbearer remembers, that the palace is real, that the promise has not expired. When you share this message with that person, you are not forwarding a video. You are being the cupbearer. You are being the one who remembers at the critical moment and speaks a name that opens a door. Take 30 seconds. Send it to them. It could be the thing that keeps them going. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I want to invite you warmly and sincerely to do that right now. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that every time a new message goes out, you are the first to receive it. This channel exists for one reason only: to find the chosen ones who are still in their preparation seasons and to speak over them with enough clarity and enough love that they do not give up before there suddenly arrives. When you subscribe, you are not just joining a channel. You are planting yourself in a community of people who are walking the same road, carrying the same kind of calling, and choosing every day to keep going together rather than alone. And for those of you who feel that what has been poured out here has been worth more than a like and a subscription, there is a donate link waiting for you in the video description below and in the pinned comment at the top of the comment section. Every single contribution, no matter how small, goes directly into the continuation of this work, into everything that goes into producing a message of this depth and this length for chosen ones who need it. If this message has been a companion to you in a hard season, if it has been the voice in the room when the room felt empty, if it has helped you hold on through a chapter that was trying to make you let go, please consider supporting it through the donate link in the description and the pinned comment. You are not just giving to a channel. You are investing in the message that is going to reach the next chosen one who is one video away from deciding to keep going. Like this message if it has reached you. Share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to stay in the flow of what is being poured out here. And if you feel led, support this work through the link in the description and the pinned comment. The fire is real, the community is real, and the God who gathered every one of you into this room at this moment is the same God who is gathering everything else that belongs to you and moving it toward you even now. There is someone watching this right now who has been going through their journey completely alone. No one in their immediate world understands what they carry. No one around them speaks the language of calling and destiny and divine preparation. And for that person, finding this community is not a small comfort. It is a lifeline. It is the discovery that the thing they have been carrying in secret is recognized here, honored here, spoken about here, with a fluency and a reverence that they have never encountered anywhere else. If that person is you, I want you to know that you have found your room. This is your community. These are your people. And the fire that brought you here is the same fire that is going to carry you through to everything that is waiting on the other side of the season you are currently in. Shine, without apology, without diminishment, without the fear that being fully visible will make you a target rather than a torch. You were made to be a torch. The world that is waiting for what you carry has been waiting long enough. And the community that surrounds you right now, seen and unseen, near and far, is cheering for the moment when you finally step in the fullness of everything you were always meant to be. There is a word that has been following you for longer than you realize. Not a word spoken by any human voice. Not a word that arrived through any ordinary channel of communication. But a word that has been woven into the fabric of your existence from the moment you were first formed. A word that has survived every attempt to drown it out, every season of noise and confusion and contradiction, every voice that told you that you had misread your own life and that the thing you believed about yourself and about your calling was nothing more than wishful thinking, dressed up as spiritual conviction. That word has not been canceled. It has not been revoked. It has not grown quiet with time or worn thin with the waiting. It is as strong today as it was the day it was first spoken over you, and it is this: favored. You are favored, not because you have earned it, not because your record is clean, or your faith has been perfect, or your journey has been without the kind of detours that make a person question everything. You are favored because the God who placed his hand on you before you were born does not remove his hand based on the difficulty of the terrain you have had to cross to get here. Favor is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the life of a chosen one. Because when most people think of favor, they think of ease. They think of doors that open without resistance, of relationships that flourish without conflict, of finances that grow without strain, of a life that moves in the direction of blessing without the kind of friction that makes forward motion painful. And when their life does not look like that, when the doors are heavy and the relationships are complicated and the finances are tight and the forward motion requires everything they have just to maintain, they conclude that they must not be favored. That favor is something other people carry, something they missed out on somewhere along the way. But Joseph was favored in Potiphar's house. Joseph was favored in the prison, not after he left those places, in them. The favor of God is not a reward that waits at the end of a difficult season. It is a presence that accompanies the chosen one through every dimension of the difficult season, working in the background of every circumstance, turning what was intended for harm toward an outcome that the one doing the harming never anticipated. The favor on your life is not suspended while you are in your hard place. It is most actively at work, precisely there, in the places where natural logic says that nothing good could come from this. Think about the moments in your own life where you should not have made it through, and you did. The moment where the situation was severe enough that the reasonable outcome was collapse, and instead, you found a strength you could not account for. The moment where the door that closed in front of you, the one that felt like the end of everything, turned out to be the thing that redirected you towards something you could not have found any other way. The relationship that ended and left you devastated. That you would have stayed in indefinitely if the choice had been yours, that in the fullness of time revealed itself as a mercy disguised as a loss. Those moments were not luck. They were not coincidence. They were favor operating in the form that favor most often takes in the life of a chosen one, which is protection that does not always feel like protection in the moment it is being applied. Isaiah 49 verse 16 carries a detail that most people read past without fully absorbing what it means. God says, "I have engraved you on the palms of my hands," not written, not noted, engraved. And engraving is not something you do to information you might need to reference later. Engraving is what you do to something you intend to carry permanently. Something that goes wherever you go. Something that is present in every action your hands take because it is part of the hands themselves. Your name is not in a file that God occasionally opens to check your status. Your name is on the hands that are actively working right now. In this moment, in the circumstances of your life, moving things you cannot see, arranging what you cannot arrange, protecting what you do not even know needs protecting. Every time those hands move, your name moves with them. You are not being remembered from a distance. You are being carried in the work itself. You have been protected from things you will never fully know you were protected from. There were doors that did not open for you that would have led you somewhere that the call on your life could not have survived. There are relationships that did not form that would have slowly dismantled the thing in you that God was carefully constructing. There are opportunities that collapsed at the last moment that would have taken you in a direction that looked like success by every external measure, while quietly moving you further from the specific assignment that your life was designed to fulfill. You did not see the protection in those moments. You felt the loss. You felt the disappointment. You felt the confusion of a door closing that you had prayed open. But behind every one of those closings was the hand of a God who could see what you could not see, and who loved you enough to say, "Not that one, not yet, not there, because what I have for you requires a path that does not run through that door." Numbers 23 verse 19 says, "God is not human, that he should lie, not a human being, that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Does he speak and then not act?" Sit with that question, not as a rhetorical flourish, but as a real interrogation of the fear that has been living quietly in you through the long seasons of waiting. The fear that says, maybe God said it once, but the circumstances have changed too much. Maybe he intended it when he spoke it, but what happened since has altered the outcome. Maybe the promise was real, but the one who received it has drifted too far, waited too long, failed too many times for the original intention to still be in effect. And the scripture answers that fear not with comfort alone, but with the character of God himself. He is not human. He does not speak and then reconsider when the cost becomes apparent. He does not promise and then revise the terms when the recipient does not perform perfectly enough to keep the offer on the table. What he speaks, he acts. What he promises, he fulfills. Not because you have held on perfectly, but because he is incapable of being anything other than what he is, and what he is faithful. The favor on your life was not a conditional offer extended on the basis of your performance. It was a sovereign declaration made on the basis of his character. And his character does not change with your seasons. It does not diminish when your faith wavers. It does not retract when your circumstances argue loudly that the promise has been forgotten. It remains exactly what it was the day it was spoken, complete, absolute, unchanging, held in place not by your grip on it, but by the grip of a God who does not lie and does not change his mind and does not speak without acting and does not promise without fulfilling. You are favored fully, permanently, irrevocably, not because you have earned it and not because you have maintained it, but because the one who declared it over your life is the one being described in Numbers 23, verse 19. And that God, the one who cannot lie and will not change his mind, has spoken your name over a favor that nothing in your history and nothing in your circumstance and nothing in heaven or on earth has the authority to cancel. Walk in that today, exactly as you are, from exactly where you are standing. From exactly where you are standing. Not from a better version of where you are. Not from the position you will occupy after the next breakthrough arrives. And the evidence lines up more convincingly with what you have been believing. From here. From this exact coordinate on the map of your journey. With the full weight of everything that brought you to this point still on your shoulders. With the questions that have not yet been answered still open. With the gaps between what was promised and what is currently visible still as wide as they have always been. The favor moves from here. The fulfillment begins from here. The God who cannot lie and will not change his mind does not require you to first arrive somewhere more impressive before he acts on what he has already spoken. And this is perhaps the most freeing truth that a chosen one can receive in the season just before their suddenly. That the favor is not waiting for you to get it together. It is not waiting for your faith to reach a certain level of consistency or your obedience to reach a certain level of perfection or your circumstances to reach a certain level of alignment before it activates. It is active now. It has been active through every imperfect, doubt-filled, wandering chapter of your journey. And it will be the thing that carries you from the prison to the palace, not because you earned the transition, but because the one who declared it over you has never for a single moment wavered in his intention to see it through. The threshold you have been standing at is real. The shift you have been sensing is real. And the chapter that is about to open has been written in a hand that does not revise and does not retreat. You are standing at the edge of your suddenly, and it is closer than your last hard season allowed you to believe. You have been standing at a threshold that you could not quite name. You have felt it in the quality of the waiting, which has shifted recently from the heavy, grinding patience of someone who does not know if anything is coming, to something closer to the particular alertness of a person who can sense movement in a room before anything visible has changed. Something in you knows that the atmosphere around your life is different now than it was a year ago, different than it was 6 months ago, different even than it was when you first pressed play on this message and settled in to hear what God might be speaking into your specific season. That shift in the atmosphere is not your imagination. It is not wishful thinking dressed up as spiritual perception. It is your spirit registering something that your natural mind has not yet been given the language to process. And what it is registering is this: you are not in the middle of your story anymore. You are approaching the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And the chapter that is opening is the one that everything else has been building toward. Joseph felt this too, though he had no way of articulating it in the moment. There is a detail in his story that is easy to pass over, but that carries an enormous amount of weight if you are willing to sit with it. When Pharaoh's cupbearer was restored to his position, exactly as Joseph had interpreted his dream, the scripture tells us that the cupbearer forgot Joseph. He walked out of the prison and back into the palace, and the name of the man who had given him the word that restored him did not cross his lips for 2 full years. 2 years, not 2 days, not 2 weeks. 2 years of Joseph remaining in a prison while the person who had the connection to free him simply forgot that he existed. And I want you to feel what those 2 years must have felt like from the inside of that prison. Because Joseph did not know they were 2 years. He did not know there was a timeline. He did not know that at the end of those 2 years, Pharaoh was going to have a dream that no one could interpret, and that the cupbearer's memory was going to activate at exactly the right moment, and that everything was going to move faster than Joseph could have imagined. He only knew that the day the cupbearer walked out, he had reason to hope that his release was close. And then the days kept coming, and the weeks became months. And the months accumulated into a silence so prolonged that the reasonable conclusion was that he had been forgotten, not just by the cupbearer, by everyone. But God does not forget. That is not a platitude. That is a theological reality with consequences so specific and so practical that it changes how you read every silent season in your life. God does not forget the chosen ones he has placed in preparation. He does not lose track of the timeline. He does not misplace the promise. And when the moment arrives, the precise, heaven-orchestrated, cannot be manufactured by any human effort moment, everything moves. The cupbearer remembers. Pharaoh summons. The prison door opens. And Joseph, who had been forgotten by men for 2 years, is remembered by God in a way so complete and so public that the forgetting itself becomes part of the testimony. Your 2 years are ending. I do not say that as a formula or as a spiritual cliche designed to make you feel better without actually meaning anything. I say it because the quality of what you are carrying right now, the specific combination of preparation and perseverance, and the particular kind of readiness that only comes from having waited longer than was comfortable, is the profile of someone who is standing at the end of their prison sentence and the beginning of their palace assignment. Right now, before we go any further, I want you to stop and do something. Not at the end of this message. Right now, in this moment, while what I just said is still sitting on your chest with the full weight of what it means. Go to the comments and type these 3 words. I am ready. Not as performance. Not spiritual theater designed to make you look like you have more faith than you feel, but as the sound of a threshold being crossed, as the declaration of a chosen one who has waited long, enough and suffered enough, and held on through enough to stand at this moment and say out loud what the deepest part of them has always known. I am ready. It means you are no longer asking God to confirm what he already said. You are agreeing with it. You are meeting his word with your yes. Type those 3 words now, and then come back. Because what follows is for the ones who mean it. The waiting has done what it was designed to do. The preparation has produced what it was always building toward. And the God who engineered every detail of the process is the same God who is now engineering the moment of release with the same precision, the same intentionality that he has applied to every other chapter of your story. There is a suddenly coming for you, not a gradual improvement, not a slow turning of the tide that takes years to become visible, a suddenly. The kind that Joseph experienced when the prison door opened, and the palace became not a dream, but a destination. The kind that cannot be explained by the natural accumulation of effort and opportunity because it moves faster than natural accumulation allows. The kind that makes people around you say they do not understand how this happened so quickly, not realizing that what looks sudden to the outside world is actually the harvest of years of invisible, faithful, costly preparation that was always moving toward this moment, even when nothing on the surface suggested it. God moves in suddenlies for chosen ones who have completed their preparation. Not because he is dramatic, though the drama of Joseph's reversal is undeniable, but because the specific nature of the assignment requires an entrance that matches the magnitude of what is being undertaken. You cannot ease gently into the fulfillment of a purpose that was designed to change things significantly. You step into it, and the step, when it comes, is a step that redefines everything before it in its light. Malachi 3 verse 10 says, "Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Floodgates, not a trickle, not a careful measured release that keeps you grateful without overwhelming you. Floodgates. The image is of something held back under enormous pressure, not because the one holding it is reluctant to release it, but because the vessel on the other side needed to be built strong enough to receive it without being destroyed by the force of the flow. And now the vessel is ready. You are ready. The floodgates are opening, not eventually, not in another season of prison. Silence. Now, in this season, in the very moment that you are standing in, with the full weight of everything you have carried, and everything you have survived, and everything you have refused to let go of, even when letting go would have been so much easier. You are ready. You already said it, now walk in it. And walking in it does not mean that every question has been answered, or that every shadow has been cleared from the path ahead. Walking in it means that you have decided to move forward from this moment with the knowing that you carry rather than the doubt that visits. It means that the declaration you just made in the comments, those 3 words that cost you something to type because they required you to mean them, that declaration is now the ground you are standing on, not the circumstances, not the silence of the last 2 years, not the voice that will return tomorrow morning and try to convince you that nothing has changed. The ground you are standing on is the word you agreed with, the promise you said yes to, the God you trusted enough to meet his word with your own. Joseph walked out of the prison into a world that had not yet rearranged itself to accommodate what was about to happen to him. The palace was still the palace. Pharaoh was still Pharaoh. The advisors who would soon be standing aside for a Hebrew prisoner were still seated in their positions of authority, unaware that the one who would supersede them was, at that moment, still wearing prison clothes. The suddenly had been decreed in heaven before it was visible on earth, and Joseph walked toward it before he could see it, carried by the same knowing that you are being asked to carry right now. The knowing that says the door is already open, even if my eyes have not yet seen it swing. That is the walk of a chosen one in the final moments before their suddenly. Not a triumphant march with every flag flying and every question resolved. A quiet, faithful, deliberate forward motion in the direction of a promise that is more real than anything the visible world is currently offering as evidence. One step, and then another. Not because you have figured it all out, but because the God who sent you before you understood where you were going has never once lost track of where this is headed. The kept thing is already moving toward you. The name is already on the lips of the one who will speak it. The door is already turning on its hinge. And you, walking forward in the knowing, are closer to your palace than any morning of your prison life. ever allowed you to believe. There is something that has been kept for you, not lost, not forgotten, not given to someone else because the waiting took too long, or the process was too costly, or the gap between who you were and who the assignment required became too wide to bridge. Kept, deliberately, carefully, with the kind of intentionality that does not leave things to chance or allow the passage of time to erode what was set aside with a specific name attached to it. And that name is yours. The blessing that has been reserved in the economy of heaven for the fulfillment of your calling has not been redistributed in your absence. It has not been offered to someone more available or more prepared or more willing to receive it without the complications that come with a life as deeply formed as yours has been. There is a difference between something that has been forgotten and something that has been stored. Forgotten means gone, released, no longer held in any account, dissolved into the past with no claim on the future. But stored means something entirely different. Stored means set aside deliberately, held in trust, kept in a specific place by a specific hand for a specific moment when the one it belongs to is finally ready to receive it without being overwhelmed by it. A father who stores a gift for his child is not withholding it out of indifference. He is protecting both the gift and the child, holding the magnitude of what he has prepared until the capacity of the one he prepared it for has grown large enough to hold it without being crushed by it. God has not forgotten what belongs to you. He has been storing it. And the storing has been an act of love, as deliberate and as careful as the original giving. The gift has your name on it. It has always had your name on it. And the Father, who has been holding it in trust through every season of your preparation, is even now looking at you and seeing that the capacity is finally large enough. The character is finally deep enough. The foundation is finally strong enough, and his hands are beginning to move. Joseph discovered this truth in the moment he stood before his brothers, the same brothers who had stripped him of his coat and thrown him into the pit and sold him into the hands of strangers without a backward glance at the sound of his crying. He stood before them as the second most powerful man in the known world, with the authority to feed them or to destroy them. And what he chose to do in that moment was not what any natural reading of the story would have predicted. He chose to weep. He chose to reveal himself not from a position of triumphant superiority, but from a place of such genuine emotion that the Egyptian attendants in the room were sent away because what was happening was too intimate, too human, too saturated with the weight of years and loss and reunion for any witness who did not understand the full depth of the story. And then he said the words that have echoed through the centuries as one of the most powerful declarations of divine sovereignty ever recorded by human lips. He said, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Not, you intended evil and I have survived it. Not, you did your worst and I rose above it through my own strength and my own determination. But God sent me, the same journey that his brothers had designed as destruction, God had been using as direction. The same pit that was meant to be the end of his story had been the beginning of the chapter that would make him the instrument of salvation for an entire region. The same betrayal that should have broken him had been the path along which God carried him to exactly the place he was always meant to stand. That reframe, that complete and total reorientation of how Joseph read his own story, is the gift that is waiting for you on the other side of your suddenly. Not just the position, not just the restoration of what was taken, not just the palace after the prison, but the understanding, the seeing of the whole map from the vantage point of the destination. The moment when you look back at everything that brought you here And you understand with a clarity that no amount of explanation during the journey could have produced that. None of it was random. None of it was accident. None of it was God being absent or inattentive or unable to prevent what was happening. All of it, every chapter, every pit, every prison, every silent stretch where the cupbearer forgot and the days accumulated and the palace felt further away than it had ever felt. All of it was God sending you, directing you, moving you through the very circumstances that were trying to stop you, toward the place you could not have reached any other way. The thing that has been kept for you is not only a blessing in the conventional sense of that word. It is not only financial restoration, though for some of you that is part of it. It is not only relational healing, though for some of you that is the deepest longing of your heart. It is not only the career breakthrough, or the creative opening, or the platform that allows what is in you to reach the people it was always meant to reach. Though all of these things are part of the picture, what has been kept for you is the fullness of your story, the complete version of the narrative that God has been writing in you and around you and through you from the beginning. The version where every thread that seemed to end in a tangle is revealed to have been part of a pattern so intricate and so beautiful that the only response when you finally see it whole is worship. This is what chosen ones are kept for. Not just success by the world's definition. Not just a life that looks good from the outside and satisfies the metrics by which the world measures worth and achievement, but a life so specifically and so thoroughly lived in alignment with the purpose for which it was designed that it becomes a testimony. A living, breathing, walking testimony that the God who calls is the God who keeps, that the promise that was spoken over a life in the hidden place will be fulfilled in the public place, that the pit is never the destination, and the prison is never the permanent address, and the suddenly that looks impossible from inside the waiting is the very thing that God has been building toward all along. I want to speak now to the thing that has been the hardest to hold on to through the longest part of your waiting. The dream. Not the small version of it that you have edited down over the years to make it more manageable, more believable, more proportionate to the evidence that surrounded you. The original dream, the one that came to you before the world started talking you out of it. The one that felt so large and so specific and so impossible that you eventually started keeping it in a smaller and smaller space inside you. Not because you stopped believing it, but because believing it too loudly felt like setting yourself up for a pain too great to survive if it did not come. God wants that dream back at its original size. He does not want the edited version. He does not want the practical compromise you made with your own hope in the years, when hope was too expensive to carry at full volume. He wants the unedited, undiminished, original dream that He placed in you before the world got its hands on it. Because the dream He gave you was not sized for your comfort, it was sized for His glory. And what brings Him glory is not the modest version of a chosen one's calling, carefully bounded by what seems achievable given the current evidence. What brings Him glory is the full expression of what He placed in a person before they were born, fulfilled in a way that makes clear to everyone watching that no human effort alone could have produced this, that something outside the natural order has been at work here, that the God who spoke this into existence at the beginning is the same God who brought it to completion at the end. Isaiah 49 verse 16 says, "See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me." Engraved, not written in pencil where it might be erased, not marked in something that fades with time or washes away in the flood of what has happened since. Engraved, permanent, indelible. carried on the very hands of God Himself, so that every time those hands move, every time they work, every time they reach into the circumstances of a world that is always in motion, your name goes with them. You are not an afterthought in the mind of God. You are not a name on a list so long that yours gets lost in the middle of it. You are engraved, specific, known, carried. And the walls of your life, the boundaries of what you are building and what you are becoming, are ever before Him. He has not looked away. He has not been distracted by the scale of a universe too vast for any one chosen one to register as significant. You register. You have always registered. And what He has kept for you registers with the same specificity, the same permanence, the same unbreakable intentionality as the name He has carried on His hands since before you knew you had one. The blessing is on its way, not as a vague spiritual assurance designed to get you through another season of waiting without losing your faith, but as a specific, targeted, precisely timed release of everything that was always yours, moving toward you with the same certainty and the same momentum as a river that has been held behind a dam and is now, finally, being given room to flow. You do not need to chase it. You do not need to manufacture it. You do not need to figure out the mechanism by which it arrives or the route along which it travels or the face it will be wearing when it finally appears at your door. You only need to remain, to stay in the place of faithfulness that has defined your journey through every hard season, to keep showing up with the same quality of presence and the same depth of integrity that Joseph carried through the pit and the slave house and the prison, knowing that the cupbearer remembers when it is time, knowing that Pharaoh calls when the moment is right, knowing that the God who has been keeping what belongs to you is not keeping it from you, but keeping it for you, with a faithfulness so thorough and a love so complete that even the waiting has been an act of grace. What has been kept for you is coming. It has your name on it. It has always had your name on it. And the one who has been holding it in trust through every season of your preparation is even now moving it toward you with a precision and a tenderness that will make the receiving of it one of the most sacred moments of your life. Stay, remain, hold on, the kept thing is coming home. You have made it to this moment. Not by accident, not by the fortunate alignment of circumstances that happened to work in your favor, but by the faithfulness of a God who decided before you were formed that your story would not end in the pit, would not end in the prison, would not end the silence of a season so long and so heavy that quitting would have been the reasonable response. You made it here because you were held here, because the hands that engraved your name before you knew you had one never loosened their grip through any chapter of the journey that brought you to this final threshold. And now, standing here, at the end of everything that has been spoken, and everything that has been stirred, and everything that has been activated in the deep places of who you are through the course of this message, I want you to feel the full weight of what that means. Not the theological concept of it, the personal reality of it. The fact that the God of the universe, the one who stretched out the heavens and set the stars in their places, breathed life into the and has been sovereign over every moment of history since, looked at you, specifically you, and said, finally, finally. The word that opened this message is the word that closes it, because everything in between has been the filling in of that word, the content of what finally means when God says it over a chosen one who has endured what you have endured and persevered through what you have persevered through, and arrived at this moment still breathing, still believing, still holding on to the thread of a calling that the world has tried in every conceivable way to convince you to release. Finally means the waiting is complete. Finally means the preparation has produced what it was always building. Finally means the season that felt like it would never end has ended, and the season that felt like it would never come has arrived. Finally means that the God who has been patient with the process because he knew what the process was producing is now ready, completely and gloriously ready, to move in your life in a way that makes every hard chapter worth it. Joseph heard his own version of finally on the day Pharaoh summoned him from the prison. He did not hear it as an audible word. He heard it in the swing of the prison door opening. He heard it in the sound of his own footsteps on the floor of the palace. He heard it in the voice of Pharaoh saying, "There is no one so discerning and wise as you." And in that moment, standing in the fullness of a destiny that the pit had tried to bury and the prison had tried to contain, he understood something that the years inside the suffering had been slowly building toward. He understood that God had been saying finally over his life from the beginning, that the dream of the sheaves bowing had not been wishful thinking or self-importance or the fantasy of a favored son who did not understand the real world. It had been a preview, a glimpse of the destination that God had been moving him toward through every single chapter of a journey that looked from the inside like it was going wrong and looked from the outside of heaven like it was going exactly right. Your preview was real. The dream that was placed in you, the sense of calling that has survived everything that has tried to extinguish it, the stubborn, unshakable, sometimes barely breathing conviction that you were made for something specific and significant and larger than the life you have been living in the waiting. That was not your ego constructing a comfortable story. That was God showing you the destination so that you would have something to hold on to through the journey. And now, the journey has brought you here, to this moment, to this threshold, to the place where the preview becomes the reality and the dream becomes the address. And the word that God has been holding in reserve over your life since before you were born is finally spoken out loud over everything you are and everything you are about to become. I want to pray over you now, not as a formality or a ritual that closes out a message in the expected way, but as a genuine act of intercession for the chosen one who is sitting or standing or lying down in whatever space they found themselves in when this message found them. Wherever you are, I want you to receive this prayer as if it were spoken directly into your ear by the God who knows your name and has never for a single moment lost sight of you. Father, I bring before you the one who has stayed through this entire message, the one who felt pulled here by something they could not explain and who sat with every word because something in them recognized what was being spoken. You know everything they have been through to get to this moment. You know the pit by name. You know the prison by its walls. You know the length of the silence and the weight of the waiting and the exact number of nights they cried out to you in a darkness that felt like you were not there, even though you were there, closer than the darkness itself. And I am asking you now, Father, to let this be the moment the prison door swings open, the moment the cupbearer remembers, the moment Pharaoh calls and the palace becomes not a dream, but a destination. Let everything that has been kept in reserve for this chosen one begin to move. Let the blessing that has their name on it find its way home. Let the favor that has never been canceled begin to manifest in ways visible enough that even the people who doubted them will have to acknowledge that something greater than human effort is at work here. Protect them as they step into what comes next. Give them the wisdom of Joseph to steward the palace without losing the character that was built in the pit. And let them never forget, not in the fullness of what is coming, not in the abundance that is on its way, not in the glory of the suddenly that is even now beginning to move, that it was you. All of it was you. Every chapter, every detour, every door that closed and every door that is about to open, all of it was you, and all of it was love. In the name of the one who was and is to come. Amen. You are leaving this message different from how you arrived. Something has shifted in you through the course of what has been spoken here, and that shift is not going to reverse itself when the video ends. It is going to continue to work in you, to settle deeper, to become the foundation on which the next chapter of your story is built. Carry it carefully. Carry it with the reverence that belongs to something that was spoken over you, not just by a human voice, but by the God who arranged for you to hear it at this specific moment in your specific journey. And as you carry it forward, I want to speak to you heart to heart about this community and what it means to keep it alive. If this message has reached you today, if something in these words landed in a place that needed landing, I am asking you right now to hit the like button. Do it before you close this video. Not as a favor to a channel, but as an act of faith, as a public agreement that this message is true and that it deserves to travel further than it has already gone. Every like you give tells the platform that this message matters, and every time the platform agrees, another chosen one who is sitting at the bottom of their pit gets the chance to find it. Then I want to ask you to share this video right now. Think of one person whose face just came to your mind while this message was playing. You know who they are. They came to you for a reason. Maybe they are in their pit season, and they have run out of language for what they are carrying. When you share this message with that person, you are not forwarding a video. You are being the cupbearer. You are being the one who remembers at the critical moment and speaks a name that opens a door. Take 30 seconds, send it to them. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I want to invite you warmly and sincerely to do that right now. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This channel exists for one reason only: to find the chosen ones who are still in their preparation seasons, and to speak over them with enough clarity and enough love that they do not give up before there suddenly arrives. When you subscribe, you are not just joining a channel. You are planting yourself in a community of people who are walking the same road and choosing every day to keep going together rather than alone. And for those of you who feel that what has been poured out here has been worth more than a like and a subscription, there is a donate link waiting for you in the video description below and in the pinned comment at the top of the comment section. Every contribution, no matter how small, goes directly into the continuation of this work, into producing more messages for chosen ones who are still in their pits and their prisons and their long, silent seasons. The donate link is in the description and in the pinned comment. You are not just giving to a channel. You are investing in the message that is going to reach the next chosen one who is one video away from deciding to keep going. Like, share, subscribe, donate if you feel. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Know that every action you take in this moment is an act of participation in something much larger than any one video or any one message. You are chosen, you are favored, you are protected, you are finally. Go and live like it.